Oh yeah, of course. Well, why don't we go with that?
But that was fun. It was fun. Kevin's an interesting guy.
So you know we lived with Kevin.
Told me that.
That was the most interesting couple months of my life.
Thank you. He's full of.
Oh yeah.
I was over with a friend of mine down in Oregon. Really, he crossed base with Kevin on some issues from Kevin.
Oh yeah.
Some what Johnny says were sophisticated cases. They were talking about just a real fun conversation. It's interesting.
That's what the neighborhood's like. Rarely if ever. Lars, I know we have a few minutes, but once it gets to about 4:30, I could always start it and do the intro and stuff like that. Sounds good. Yeah, I'll do the short version tonight. Isn't she always?
Good thing, you know. Big love to her. We're good. So.
Okay, even in the absence of our chair, I think we can go ahead and get going. I expect him to be here anytime soon. So, welcome to the June 28th, 2023 BAR Large Meeting, Krawcheck Public Meeting Room. White, and I'll be serving as chair until our Chairman John Robinson arrives. For some reason he doesn't. He's stuck with me for the duration of the meeting. Other board members that are present here this afternoon are Louis Subchuck, James Metters, and Seton Brown, and then we're assisted by the city staff, Lawrence Courtney, and Travis Colley. Applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Staff or applicants may control the slide presentation that includes everything submitted in accordance with the submittal requirements. Do we have the clicker?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think y'all know how to work. I'll skip that part. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the City of Charleston Public Meeting channel on YouTube. Your appearance here is consent to be recorded. The order of the meeting will be as follows: an introduction or overview of the project by city staff, an applicant presentation to 10 minutes or as determined by the chair upon request of the applicant, a period of public comment, which we've only received one written from the preservation society. That's been distributed to the board members in advance of the meeting. Anyone that arrives in public who does want to speak in person will need to give their name and address. After that, city staff will give their comments and recommendation, and then there'll be a few minutes for applicant response or clarification of that. Then there'll be a board discussion and a vote, and then John, will poll each board member for a positive affirmation, yea in favor, or a negative nay, not in favor. And the results will be posted on the city website. Items have been withdrawn. I think that's boilerplate. And as a reminder, please turn off all cell phones and other disruptive devices, and please limit your comments to architecture only. With that, David, proceed.
Item is approval of the minutes from the June 14th meeting as submitted or modified otherwise.
Okay, do I hear second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
And the second item on the agenda, our first and only application is 578 Meeting Street. This is new construction. It's in the east side neighborhood. It's in the 3 and 5 height district. It is in the historic corridor district. The applicant is requesting preliminary approval of an approximately 200 apartment building with a live work program at the ground level, with a central amenity space and with structured underground parking. And with that, we have some context slides. First one there, if you'll back up one, please, Mr. Golly. That shows Meeting Street on the west, Johnson Street on the north. Johnson Street on the north, Stewart on the south, and Nassau on the east. And that central section there is the portion of the building that will remain as what is being termed the remnant building. That is a portion that has been approved for demolition. And this is looking from the rear. Most of that, in fact, all of that you can see will be removed. Across the meeting, there are these historic structures, and the first on the side is the Greater Middleton AME Church at the corner of Nassau and Stewart.
Okay, now quick presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello? If it needs to be recorded, I'll get a little closer.
That mic will be, yeah.
Oh, great. I'm Richard Gow with LS3P. I'm here today with Representative Oliver, the land seller, my team, Brianna. These fellows who are going to do the heavy lifting. The last time we were here in March, we got approval for a project that had been denied several times. We got a lot of good press. I mean, it's the first time I've been associated with a project that has a social media blast that was actually in favor of it. So thank you for your approval of that and the reception there. There were minor comments, and the dynamic folks have made some headway, and excited to see the reaction. Look forward to all the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I'm Ross Kirby with Dynamic Design, the architects of record for the project. And to build a little bit off what Richard said, I think one of the reasons the conceptual design was so successful is because we took the feedback from the board and really spent a lot of time thinking about that and integrate that into the design and come in with something that was really the right project for this site. And so the comments on the conceptual design reflect that. And what we're going to talk about a little bit first is the actual comments themselves. And it's a little hard to read up here, but there's a handful of staff comments and a few board comments that we want to go through. And I'll read the comments here and touch on what our approach was. And then later in the presentation, you'll see some visual representation of how we addressed those comments. But we took the same thought and care to these comments that we did in the initial round during the previous reviews of the multiple design iterations for this project. And I think it'll show in what we've come up with here that we've taken the success of the original conceptual design, built upon it with the feedback we got during conceptual review, and have enhanced that and furthered the detailing so that the nature of the project remains as high quality as it was before, and we built upon the success that we had established before. So the first comment was asking us to restudy the fifth floor, and you can see kind of in some of the images on the bottom middle of the page. There were comments about the darkness of the fifth floor that fronts on the, and wraps around the two corners. So we'll talk about how we address that from a detailing and color perspective. The second one was at the fifth floor elevation, the brick wasn't wrapping around one of the elevations, so the brick was just a flat facade, and then there was fiber cement wrapping around the corner. So the request was that we continue the brick around that corner, which we've done. The third comment was asking us for the fourth and fifth floors to be more consistent. And that's in regard to some windows that were shown that are of a horizontal orientation. So we've removed those from the project so that the windows that remain in the project are the vertically oriented to be consistent with across the entire project. And then the last city comment response, or excuse me, the fifth one, was asking us to provide some views from further down the main street so you can see what the screening of what you actually see driving down the street. So those are incorporated towards the end, and we've included the mechanical rooftop units and the screening in that as well, so that you can see them. The sixth comment was along the, and this was the most significant one architecturally, along the south side of the building that faces the church. The request was that we provide more windows and return the brick further into that opening. So we'll show how we work with the city to create a solution that addresses that request. And then there were a handful of board comments that are all semi-related about the center building, and that is the sort of color and detailing in the center building being something that either relates to the Regis or is more in keeping with the design of the Regis, the existing footprint to remain. We're trying to make those feel like they're more in tandem and less contradictory. So we'll show how we address that comment later on. So, and that comment was treated in various fashions. There was one request that it be lighter, one request that it be darker, and I think the PSC requested that it be more traditional design. So when we get to that particular imagery, we'll talk through what our solutions were for each of those.
In terms of, this is Christoph Drumming from DesignWorks. In terms of site plan, it hasn't really changed. For those who went up in the meeting before, the whole concept was to break the building into 4 buildings with alleyways throughout, pedestrian access on 4 sides, 2 plazas on leading streets to welcome the public into the site with historic building in the middle. And we kept pretty much the design from the conceptual level, just to be further out in terms of materials, detail of the planters, height of the planters, and other items.
And so this is the rendering you'll see. On the top was as presented in conceptual, and on the bottom is the current rendering. So we made some adjustments to the colors that are being painted onto the existing Regis building to give a little more character to it, a little more illumination between the various facades to accentuate the actual design. So currently it's all painted white brick, so we have actually 3 separate colors for each of the tiers of that facade. And the request that we had that we thought was most appropriate for our means of addressing the center building was a request that we lighten it up. So you can see the colors a little bit lighter on the bottom, the new rendering. thing that came out of that was some general concern about the amount of fiber cement that was being shown, which is what those outboard frames were originally proposed as. And so we went back and looked through and really thought through, as we continued working the project, the detailing of that and what the best material was to create the look we were trying to achieve. And so what we settled on and what's reflected in this middle we made is that we have a prefabricated profiled FRP panel that will create the outboard element of that. So that's reducing the amount of fiber cement that was on the project by a little more than half. And one of the main reasons we wanted to go with FRP is because it gives consistency in the detailing and a consistency in the look of the building. It reduces the number of seams. Whereas in the previous detailing where we had it built up with fiber cement profiles, the ability to maintain the level of craftsmanship we want to achieve with that would be difficult. So what we're proposing, and you can see later in the details that are included in this middle, is an FRP profile that has prefabricated shapes so that there's a lip on that edge. There's a nice little detail here.
Sorry to interrupt, is this material?
No, that is the fiber cement that goes on the vertically oriented portions that are on the rear of the building, sort of towards the contract internal portion of the alley.
So it's this guy.
Yes.
Yes, that's the apartment.
How many times will we fit this on Zoom?
And so in the enlargement, you can see a little bit better how we incorporated that. We did look when we were doing it before the conceptual review and doing a more traditional design for this building to try and make it look more like the Regis. But all the iterations we did of that we felt were not in keeping with the design of the Regis. It served to make the Regis feel more like it disappeared into that building. Whereas keeping the contemporary design we've got for it now lets the Regis have its own presence on the street.
Well, going down to the street level on the streets, the project has really not changed from where we scheme. What you're seeing there is basically the use of pavers and bricks. You have a little sample on the top right, you have a physical sample here, but it's basically keeping the tone on the light gray, darker grays, and mixed texture on it. So it's not really the brown brick, it's more of a lighter color. That will also keeping into the alleys in a much more simple color palette. We're using those three colors to create kind of a classic patterns on the ground. And then you have a few steps up to the alleyways. The detail that you see of the gates, which you don't see in the 3D color, is a Avenue, that's the same color, which is that black color, which is kind of a brown color domes. We're using that same color for the gates and for the arch, for the lanterns. The ground being basically ceiling block stuccos with a cap of precast. Kind of using the same palette as the rest of the buildings. What you see on the bottom right is basically the finishing of the planters in the alleyways, and those planters turned along the corner right at the end of the plaza. And this is basically a board finish concrete walls with a board finish, basically imprinted, and then that's what we're using for these walls. But the other walls around the building, you see there are made of the brick, more traditional. It's kind of matching the planters. They are more modern architecture with central block and more classic architecture on the outside.
So, Christophe or Richard or Ross, did y'all determine what the original paint color was of the Regis building? Did y'all look at what, or was it white all the time as far as you know?
We have not stripped off the paint from the existing structure to see what color the actual brick is, but
It's neither here. I'm just interested to know if you found it.
So here the other way, basically showing you the previous rendering, and you can see, look at it more closely, you can see actually the marking of the holes inside it. And then in general, all the planters inside and outside, and we do again and again, is when we have trees, they become 36 inches tall, 19 inches when we have just shrubs and block. So basically it allows us to basically have seating walls also on top of the industrial planters.
the only thing we want to talk about here by including these sections is that part of the challenge with this project is that it's in the floodplain. We have to have the residential flooding at a certain level above that, and we have varied all our parking. So one thing we've done to kind of make the project better as a result of having to work through those things is to let the difference in elevation really help delineate the public versus private and the transition from the public street area where there's a lot of planters and knee wall seating and things like that to the more private area, the alleys that are just for the residents. So just a demonstration that that's still the case here from what we presented originally. As you come around the corner on Meeting Street towards Stewart, so this is the northwest corner of the site. Really what we want to talk about on this one is the comment that was made about the dark and the heaviness of the fifth floor on this corner. And what we talked through with the city staff, since that was one of their comments, was that we reduce the amount of overhang for the detailing of the cornice on this to help reduce the weight of it. We don't think that making it a lighter colors, the brighter coaches felt like it is trying to work with what's below, and having it set back to create the outdoor patios at the upper level, we think gives a lot of visual relief there, unless the sustain on its own and reduce the floors.
So it's basically, you see a section, it's the same detail for the gates on the back, the same one. You can see the center of the brick, which is actually the brick in the middle, which is the only brick used. That brick is the only use for the planters. It's a darker color than the one from the building itself. What we're actually matching, and we see in perspective, is the pattern, which basically bring up with vertical, so horizontal, inches to 3 feet tall. And you can see within the architecture, the base of the building, some of them have that vertical pattern as well. So we're using the pattern, but the color is a bit darker. And I think when you see perspective, it makes sense not to have too much of a light color at the bottom, something down. As you go up, the color changes. You can see the difference of the coloring. Another thing you can see from the evolution from the conceptual, as we were working, more in detail about trees with those palms and everything else, you can see that we try to keep those planters as low as possible. So there's a bit like a big wall in front of the building, so that when we don't need the trees, we keep them at, again, 19 inches, 20 inches, and then 25 inches, and then we go up to 26 inches when there's tree needed. And it kind of helps in this scenario to show better the gate. If you get it really high, you can see the iron gate in the middle of the lantern. That's the next street, which is kind of like the more less public street. On itself, there's still a corridor access for pedestrian in the middle, with a lantern hanging in the middle. And what we have here is just a simple, same thing idea of the materials for the planters and using the standards, tree rails.
And one thing you'll notice on this between the original conceptual rendering and the current one is that the way the planter transitions around the corner was reworked, because one of the things we ran into with that corner was just getting really busy with that stoop at the corner unit. So we eliminated that, have the planter that wraps low around the corner and steps up where the trees are, so that we're consistent with our design language around the streetscape. And you'll see also that the windows have changed a little bit, so the ground floor windows are larger and more open and visually inviting. And then we have the double windows up above that.
Is the base high as a under the standards?
No, it's not higher. It's the same height it was before. It's just the rendering makes it look.
The planter heights change also, that's why, we've got it lower with those no tree in the corner. So there's not as much of an impact in the corner from the planter seating.
This is about 6 feet or so from grade to that ground floor of the residential unit where the stoop was. It just felt like an unnecessarily tall stoop. Didn't really present a nice facade to that street frontage.
The last street, which is the one actually that's the most recessed from the public realm. And the reason why is the slab itself is really where the green of the planters are available. That side in front of it is actually just dirt, so actually we can put the trees directly on the landscape directly on the ground. So we have those long and just small trees, and then you have the straight trees typical designated by us. And then you can see that the detail on the right, which you can go to the perspective if you want. Basically, what you see, the way we create the privacy between the church and the building, on the left, the lighter car building, building a CMU block stuccoed with a precast cap with some columns on regular spacing to basically give more privacy to the church from the walkway that leads into the complex. And on the other hand, on the other side, what you're using is the green hedge. It's actually going to be a green wall along the facade as well to create privacy. And the reason why we did just that as a hedge is because we don't have much property. So we try to make it as efficient as possible and to screen the spaces, and it will be softer to use landscaping.
On the side, you can also see what's most likely the most significant architectural revisions on the top, where I was talking about the south elevation of the building that faces the church, needing to have more windows. Originally, and still, that building is very close to the property line. Fortunately, there is an easement that runs right along that property line, and we worked with the building and fire departments to make sure that we were allowed to have more openings than that facade. So they confirmed that we would be able to have the amount of windows we have shown. This is also where the request was made that we wrap the brick, return the brick more onto this facade. So we've got twice as much brick as we had before. We kept the taller 4-story portion as the fiber cement FRP that we have on the rest of the alleys, because we feel like this is still something that's more private. It's not a public street facing because the church is in the way. So it follows the same more informal design language that the other alleys do. And then we did agree that because there's still so much exposure as you come around the east side of the church, that returning the brick further into the project was the right move. So that's what we've done here. These were the perspectives that were requested, showing from the distance. So we've not shown all the contextual buildings, but this is from the several blocks away, the perspective that you can see.
Try to get a minimum light pollution within the complex. There's a lot of using of sconces, applied down lights and pathlights and bars all over the sites. Obviously on the street we use the standard Charleston lights and trees.
And since those were the changes that were requested to make, we feel like we've taken the comments in, other than the one about where there were multiple comments about different directions on the center building and whether it's darker or lighter, more traditional, less traditional. We feel like the design we've come up with here is the one that's appropriate for giving the regions its own sense of place, but also working with the design language around the rest of the alleys and the rest of the project. So the rest of the documentation is the detailing requested, and we're happy to answer any other questions you have about the design progression, addressing the comments that the board has previously, or anything else you have.
Okay. Any questions from the board? None. I don't believe we have anybody to speak on the application. So we'll move on to city staff comments and recommendations.
All right. Staff notes. This preliminary application follows closely the conceptual submittal, which, after 2 deferrals, is greatly appreciated and lauded by board and staff, and most concerns have been addressed. Staff conditions for approval. Number 1, while the applicant was asked to as it appeared too heavy, cladding has become a vertical wood-like fiber cement, as shown on sheet VAR. This material also appears to be being used at balconies and at the entry door heads and surrounds, and occasionally at walls in other certain areas. While generally opposed to this on the grounds that it is not an authentic material, staff would like to see the material at presentation before weighing in on it. And we have seen material and think that it likely be okay and is acceptable. Number two, the east facades are only shown in the streetscape comparisons on sheet VAR, which are just marginally large enough to, when zoomed in, give a good indication of what is happening here. In the future, if you guys could give us larger comparisons of just those elevations, that would be really helpful.
Are you talking about the contextual elevation?
Um,
Or just the building elevation?
Basically, we ask for comparisons of all elevations at a scale that is easily readable. Number three. Should be seen at all essential exterior materials, as well as a complete signage package at this point. If not present or complete, these should be pinned down for review and hopefully approval at board for final review. I see that there is no signage package. That's something that we've recently begun doing. It might not be in the requirements yet, but please, if you would have that for final.
Is it included as part of this, or is it a separate?
Actually, why don't you hold that? You'll have a moment to respond to all of these comments once he concludes.
Number 4. The landscaping hardscape continues to develop well. The interior site pathways and larger exterior gathering spaces being better articulated. 5, the specialty pavers need to be placed in all areas between the property line and the building to help ground buildings. Specialty pavers should also wrap into drives and in and out of parking areas. Number 6, note that any fiber cement materials are to be a minimum of 5/8 in thickness. 7, eliminate bollards in this case are more like landscape pathway lighting are acceptable here. Bollards within the parking area and are generally not visible are acceptable as well. 8, aluminum guardrails and windscreens are to not have any exposed fasteners. 9, staff is not concerned about the intentional strong juxtaposition of a more contemporary skeletal language of the central mass behind the building. We just see that as a backdrop, and we think that juxtaposition reinforces the identity of and I would like to add one more thing that's not on this list, and that involves um, um, s- stair riser lighting, which they are showing in their drawings, and that would not except in a lot of different parts of the city. Staff would like to ask the board their feelings on whether they might be acceptable here in this location with this building and in this area with this increasingly contemporary language. So with that said, our recommendation is for preliminary approval with staff and board comments.
A couple minutes for response or clarification.
Yeah, just a couple of questions I wanted to clarify. For the signage, is that meant to be part of this VAR final package, or is there a separate process for signage?
It should be represented to the board at final, yes. In terms of process, there will be a separate submittal process for signage.
And then the one comment about the papers, is that, and just so I make sure I'm understanding the intent of the comment, that along the public sidewalks between the property line and the building, you would like to have the same papers that we're proposing for the alley be in that condition and also turn into the parking deck? Or
We have actually, the one building, we have a band header course along the new buildings on leading streets. We can take it, we didn't put it in front of the planters because it was breaking, getting the same thing. The one thing we didn't do, and I think it was to keep the original kind of design, is not put it in front of the existing building because it never existed. So the concrete, if you look at the plan view of Leading Street, we kept the old building bare of that band, and then we take it. We can definitely take it all along the back and then take it back into the parking garage. It's just a header course, basically.
I think that sounds fine.
Just talking about the lighting and the steps, where exactly you're referring to? Which steps?
The steps.
Those are on the exterior steps up to the
Courtyard?
stoops at the live work units.
Oh, okay.
We have what we do is those steps are not on the steps, they're on the walls at the planters, lining up. If we cannot put them, we have a path light. But there, you don't see in the city often, that kind of, you don't put them on the risers because you can see them. It's more sideways, shining down onto the steps as you go. That's true.
Yeah, so,
that was all
Okay.
I asked to.
board discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask
Sure.
a question. There's a mention of 5/8" minimum thickness on the fiber cement. It's no problem for you, right? So this is, you tell me what this, it appears to be like a little veneer.
Yeah, so that's the arc is kind of it's like a truss, it's a composite system. So and it's shiplap. So what it'll be is there'll be a V groove at each of the joints in the shiplap, so that instead of in kind of a residential fashion where you install it horizontally and have lap siding, we went more commercial scale look. So we have in both the wood look and the solid gray tone, the vertical shiplap siding.
So this is a veneer.
That's just it won't be that thick, it will be the 5/8.
I got it, but look at this one really quick.
Yes, so it's not a through body wood color, it's just the veneer on the outside, it has the wood tone.
Okay, so it is an actual applied veneer on the outside of this piece.
It's part of its factory applied. So
Kind of go along with that a little bit. You've got a couple of facades that are composed predominantly of either the FRP or the fiber cement, which I think y'all are kind of using interchangeably. Could you flip to an elevation view that shows us sort of the greatest extent of either of these materials on a single facade?
Yeah, if you can go to probably page, the first full rendering in front of the building. So if you take the center building as the first example of the lighter gray material, this outboard, this sort of cylindrical frame that's out there, that's the FRP. So everywhere we've got the fiber cement, it's in a recessed condition. So it's at the balconies, it's behind the FRP, and it's down the inside of the galleries and on the backside of that building.
So this, just to make sure I'm not being obtuse, this is darker that surrounds the windows.
So there's two colors. There's the wood look is actually more on the inside portion, like at the balconies. And then
here.
Right, that's right. And then at the inside, right around the windows around that middle building, it's the kind of charcoal gray color.
Okay, and it's a smooth finish like that.
That is the gray color.
Not that color, but it's that. Well, that's the FRP material. It's the same material as the wood look, but in a solid gray zone.
And there's not a piece of that, is there?
Not that color.
Corners fused or? Is it-
There's a prefab metal trim piece that goes at the corner, so there's not going to be a big bulky trim piece. It'll be a clean, not mitered corner, but piece that it slots into for the ship light.
Is that this extra?
So I believe what they do, it fits into the groove on one side and into the tongue on the other side.
Part
Around
of
the
what
adjacent
sandwiches into that tongue groove is the mounting bracket.
That's right. And so when you're the vertical corner piece, it just somehow integrates into that also?
Yes. It's almost like if you think of tile, like a Schluter strip, where two pieces of tile come together and you have the little thin metal corner. Same kind of idea.
Some like a puzzle.
I can,
Yeah, it'll be
I
part
can
of it.
visualize that in the Schluter system, but in the, which is not a finished product. I was just trying to, but it's just, conceptually it's the same.
So I'll comment that I think this project, more than almost any other that I can recall in recent years, makes use of these composite materials to the greatest extent I've seen in a long time. And it reminds me a little bit of about 12 years ago, well, about 10 years ago, when half the buildings going up were being clad in Nichihop. And that was kind of short-lived because what Nichihop published in their literature and what applicants were showing in the rendering was this really nice, tight, clean, surgical, smooth facade. And then they go to build it. And it's even one thing to build it in a mock-up panel that's 12 feet tall versus a wall that's 45.
Right.
Because you get into issues of, I don't know what these products require for expansion and contraction between floor plates and things like that. So I think I know why y'all are going in this composite direction about it.
Yeah, and I'll mention, and I mentioned a little bit when I walked through this particular rendering, but part of the reason for that is that if we do it as a built-up material, then, and this was the same issue with Michelle you were talking about, the craftsmanship comes into play because they're field cut panels that they have to make to fit the frame. The FRP will come out as a fabricated piece that actually wraps around that entire pilaster, so you get a consistent look from core to core. And so it's maintaining that consistency that was part of the reason we wanted to go with the FRP on this.
One last question for me, and then I'll shut up. Are these products being chosen in part because they lighten the load on the subterranean parking?
Yeah. Okay. And the fiber cement versus the FRP doesn't contribute enough load to change the design.
Okay, I mean versus brick.
No.
Okay. Right. Other board comment?
Well, I'm still on the assembly part because it's, what links are these coming in?
I believe the board's coming 10 to 12 foot lengths.
And the
So
trim
they'll
pieces,
cover a full story at a time.
the trim pieces are the same.
Yes.
So you would have essentially an intersection where pieces are coming together all the same when you're at a corner.
That's
or
right.
Preliminary requires wall sections and kind of
Yeah,
like
they're in
that.
there. They just it may be helpful for us if you could you could fast forward to a couple of details to give us a sense of.
Yeah.
the walls.
Just for the, I looked at it, I didn't know if that was truly representative of how it would be done, but if it is,
A lot of details towards the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it might be helpful to just lay
I
out,
think over that one page.
yeah, plan view would be good.
You can see kind of in the bottom right, the plan detail shows the FRP. So the two little bump outs are where the FRP wraps all the way around that corner. And so and we have the same thing in the detail that's on the bottom left of the page. That's where the full-size tile lasher that has the FRP on the front and back. So we have the consistency there. Go to the next page. We have another plan detail later on. What do you do? Well, man, that specific detail that we can provide, and will definitely be a part of the mock-up that shows how that outside corner works at the vertical strip lap side.
Okay. All right, well, let's shift more fully into board discussion and possible motion here. What do my fellow board members think?
It seems like project went really exceptional. And all the discussions about the, I guess, colors and materials and intersection of the different materials. Yes, we will see more of that on the final, but also on the mock-up. But I agree with staff comments, and I would support the preliminary approval.
The board comment?
Sure. I appreciate the changes made to the Nassau and Stewart corner. To me, it does look like with the extension of the windows, it looks like there's a continued extension of the garage doors as well. That the massing of those and the height of those are just really impressive, but not necessarily in the best way. And those I'm referring to bar pages 26 and 16. We don't need to get them. But it's inconsistent between the planners and the windows. Just makes it look overpowering. The heaviness of the fifth floor, even if the overhang was reduced to mitigate some of that heaviness, I don't see it in the. And I did notice that there were, I guess, a removal of some rooms or repositioning of maintenance work on the top, on the roof of the building for the Johnson Meeting Street corner. That makes it now have a flat plane looking down on the side. That's BAR 18. I want to go to that page. But those are my comments. Actually, you can see it better on 19, I guess. The top left. Two windows facing back. Now just a blank wall.
So that was where we had the horizontal windows because of the actual use inside there for the unit.
Richard, the chosen color for the top floor, the dark color. I mean, obviously it's on there, so that's what you think that's the best color. best tone, the darkness of it.
For the fifth floor facing Main Street.
Well, it's all the way around.
I think that differentiating it from floor below allows the building to feel a little short. Over the years, people say that makes it look top heavy. I personally don't think that's the effect. I think setback shading will allow the overall mass.
My comments, I'm not really concerned about the color palette, although I think that it would be well to include some sort of pop of something a little more vibrant because it's very muted. And I guess the further details of the sample panel will bear out the success of these composite materials. But I think one thing that did change the corner of Stewart and Nassau, when y'all removed that last stoop in order to sort of clean up the composition, it created a circumstance where you have a nearly 6 foot tall brick wall that that's mitigated a little bit by the planter, but you still have an unbroken 6 foot tall brick wall. And I know I never really realized how much fall there is across the site in that direction, but I think that should be examined, not to falsely lower the windowsill, but rather maybe put some sort of detail as a transom above it or a bulkhead below it, you know, in these areas here.
16 is larger.
There's one thing about the rendering, so you know, but people are 4 feet too. For some reason, the rendering, the people don't show it like it's supposed to be, so that's.
Yeah, it just looks like that's near the floor though, right?
Yeah, yes. What I'm saying is just, so. things look
Did not you
good.
say that it was 6 feet from the,
It's about 6 feet.
It's 6 feet, but visually it looks almost more than that because people are supposed to be 5'7". Those are 4'5".
well, I'm 5.
Well, what I'm saying is, that's all.
Thank you
Just need to know that.
Thank you for composing this with her in mind.
The first time we look at it, it's like the building looks much bigger than it's supposed to be.
Well, but that's kind of what I was looking at. In general, it's first floor needs to be kind of interact with the pedestrian, and right now it's a solid wall there. So if said study a little bit more of how you can engage the base.
Right. There's been a few comments about tone and color and palette. It's really hard for someone like me to review something like this where the outside lighting changes from one proposal to the next. I mean, when you look at the wood paneling, it's lit up in these pictures. It's not lit up in the other ones. So it's a false coloration of what you're going to see during the day. I mean, we're going to see it in the final work, but I mean, I don't like inconsistency.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and it's not something I never really thought of. I just, in my mind, since I'm a snarky architect, I always sort of grade any sort of night shots down a couple. But that is a fair point.
The thing is that a lot of applicants do that, actually.
A ton of applicants do it. It's been so much. It's annoying.
So may I say something? The beauty of these digital images is that you have to draw the 1/8" element. And what I've been trying to coach people to do is to show me that, but show me something zoomed in so we can see how the details meet the color. I mean, it's already done once. Just show me an enlargement so we're not guessing.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a good requirement to add to the list of things you make us do.
But
Let it be noted
you're
in the-
presenting.
He's asking for more no requirements.
Detail.
Yeah.
You get paid by the megabyte, I guess.
So I agree. I agree.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah, and I appreciate the context, but when, as the building as a whole, but when I don't see the context of the project in the community, that's also difficult. Your February session was great because it showed what it looks like coming up and down Meeting Street. I don't have that here. I have a straightforward view of it. We need to see what the people are gonna see when they're going down the street.
Further board comments? Yeah, okay, well, need a motion?
I guess preliminary approval with board and staff comments.
Do we have a second? Well, I'll second it, just to get it on the table. So we have a motion for preliminary approval with board and staff comments. And I think that heard what we said about making sure that you enhance this application towards final. The motion is made by Subchuck and seconded by myself. I'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Metters? Subject?
Yeah.
Likewise, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stop, did you put those guys in there for you?
That was our guys.
How do you like it?
Yeah.